in the pursuit of truth and common sense in an unbelievable world. You're listening to the Right Mind podcast with your host, Todd Schowalter.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Right Mind. I'm Todd Schowalter. Once again, my favorite political analyst is with us today, Rich Rubino, and it's quite a day. The Republicans were trying to appoint a Speaker of the House, and I'm just going to cut to the chase here, Rich. What in the hell is going on? I mean, why apparently we can't appoint a Speaker of the House. Kevin McCarthy is coming up. He's almost on his 12th try now. How does this whole thing work?
Well, so essentially what happens, and this is just from a rudimentary standpoint, both parties put up a candidate for Speaker. Okay. Now, normally the party that's in the minority, it's all ceremonial. They'll put somebody up, it's pro forma, but they know that person's going to lose because they don't have the majority. So the Democrats will put up Hakeem Jeffries, and they'll get all 212 Democrats will vote for that person, knowing that he's going to lose just to show that he's a leader of their party. So what happens is the majority party also puts up somebody. And because they have a majority, that person, assuming every Republican or almost every Republican votes for that person, is usually elected Speaker. Once in a while, you'll have a few conservative Democrats like Gene Taylor from Mississippi would vote against Nancy Pelosi. But generally speaking, the parties are unified in this. So what's happening this time around? Well, Kevin McCarthy has a very slim majority. It's 222 to 11 with one vacancy. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean? That means that he needs just about every Republican except for 4 to come out and vote for him for Speaker. And he's obviously he's the candidate of the vast majority of the party, but there's 20 members, 19 of whom are members of the Freedom Caucus, who essentially are anti-Kevin McCarthy because they think that he's too willing to compromise and they want more power for rank and file members, particularly conservative members. So as a result, when it comes to voting for Kevin McCarthy, they are voting for another candidate, meaning that and if nobody gets 218, then the roll call goes again and again and again. And historically, in 1855, it went for 133 ballots. The last time we had anything like this, 1923, it went 10 ballots, and eventually the establishment candidate, Frederick Gillette, gave in to what was the progressive candidates at the time and allowed them, and he became Speaker.
I think it's really kind of ironic that the last time it was this bad, if you want to call it, was right before the Civil War, which is, again, kind of ironic given the state of affairs the country's in right now. What's it going to take? I mean, seriously, if I, back in the day, if I would ask a girl out and she turned me down twice, that was usually good enough. I knew she wasn't interested. No, I mean, 11 times, what was this guy just going to keep trying? I mean, what's it going to take to either get elected, get appointed, or just say, hey, look, it's obvious I'm not going to do this. Let's move on and go to option 2.
I think he's going to do this for time immemorial. I think he thinks that eventually the conservatives are going to give in, and he's given in. In part, I think, for example, he's agreed to the motion to vacate, for example, which means essentially that only one member agrees, and they can have a vote on whether there should be a new Speaker, and they can do this anytime. That's one thing he's agreed on. He's agreed that his super PAC. So basically, what happens is each congressman has certain. So basically, the leadership has a super PAC, and he's agreed that in primaries for safe seats, meaning a seat that's invariably a Republican seat that Democrats have a diminutive chance of actually winning, he will not choose winners in the primary. Normally, they would choose who they're going to pick, and sometimes it's not the most conservative candidate. So he's agreed to that. He's agreed to allow term limits legislation to come up. So he's making these agreements, but there are still some recalcitrant members that are essentially saying we do not want him to become Speaker. But my guess is he will do absolutely anything. This is somebody who's been extremely ambitious since he got elected to Congress. He was immediately a young gun. He immediately started raising money for his raising money for other Republicans and hope that they would, there's be a little bit of reciprocity and they would support him. And most of them do. But those 20 members are really his issue now.
Okay, so I mean, if say they just they don't budge, okay, and you said because they're conservative, what do we have like a lot of semi-progressives in the Republican Party? I mean, conservative to me doesn't sound like a bad thing. Why is that such a stalemate here?
Because the conservative members believe that Kevin McCarthy is too willing to negotiate, that he's too willing. He's voted for budgets. He's voted for defense increases, for example. He's too willing to spend money basically and negotiate with the Democrats. And they want somebody, they come from very conservative constituencies. One guy in Oklahoma comes from a district that went 53% for Trump. Scott Perry, the head of the Freedom Caucus, probably comes from the most swing, is one who really comes from somewhat of a swing district, and his district still went relatively, still went a cut by about 4 or 5 points for Donald Trump. So there is a movement in the Republican Party, I mean, that says essentially we don't want establishment Republicans. And they would say the same thing for Mitch McConnell, for example, in the United States Senate. If you say George W. Bush or Dick Cheney, they would say those are establishment candidates. They essentially view, other than Donald Trump, most Republicans they would view, I think, as establishment. And they're saying essentially, we're populist conservatives, we're not business-oriented conservatives. And I think that's part of the dilemma for kind of an establishment center-right Republican.
Okay, let me ask you this though. Okay, so we're saying that we have these holdouts. They aren't going along with this because they don't want the status quo. Okay, well, you look at the state of the country right now. We obviously need some changes. Okay, so I could see a handful, if not more, okay, that just don't want to openly admit it, want some shakeups, want some changes. Because the status quo obviously isn't working. All right, so in your opinion, what do we do? I mean, do you think Kevin McCarthy is the right man for the job? I'm
gonna, that's above my pay grade, but I will say this though.
No, it's not. You're on my show. I mean, so that shows that you're the highest pay grade there. No, I'm kidding. No, come on. What do you think? Give me your opinion. I mean, it's two guys just talking. Do you think he's the right guy for the job?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to stay out of that because I try to be as ideological as I can. So I'll say that it's nice weather we're having though.
Okay, it's not bad. It's not bad. Where I'm here in St. Louis, and it's anyway. Moving on. Well, Trump, he says go. We got to get McCarthy. Okay.
Yeah. This is
Oh, go ahead.
This is where it's fastest. Yeah. This is where it's fascinating. Donald Trump. So Kevin, first of all, in the 2020 election, after the January 6th, exactly two years from today, the day we're taping this. Kevin McCarthy essentially called up Donald Trump and said, essentially, you have to stop this. These are your people. And Donald Trump did not like the fact that Kevin McCarthy called him. But then a couple of weeks later, he went to Mar-a-Lago and basically said, we need to work together to get Republicans elected in 2022. And Trump basically agreed, and somewhat the way Trump can do it anyway, forgave Kevin McCarthy for taking him on the House floor that day. So Kevin McCarthy's up for re-election in Bakersfield in a primary. There's a primary challenger who's more of a Tea Party conservative. Donald Trump supports Kevin McCarthy and says he's the best candidate for the Central Valley for California. Kevin McCarthy wins that primary. They both work together to get Republicans elected. They actually do pick up 14 seats, though it was certainly underwhelming in the congressional election. So as a result, Donald Trump says Kevin McCarthy could be good. He could be a great speaker, but there are 20 members, many of whom are Trump Republicans. Lori Boebert, for example, from Colorado, Matt Gaetz from Florida. Even though they're Trump Republicans, they are still not voting for Trump's choice. There's a little fissure in there. And you have a lot of conservatives, Marjorie Taylor Greene, for example, who was very much a Trump Republican. She is in favor of Kevin McCarthy, and she is in this kind of tete-a-tete with Lori Boebert about what's going to happen with Kevin McCarthy, about whether Kevin McCarthy should be the speaker.
Okay, well, with all this going on, so you have these extremes. So you got Kevin McCarthy, and then you got these guys, and gals, whatnot, that don't want him. All right, isn't there something out of this whole house, this giant group of people, that people can say, all right, well, I'll concede, this guy wouldn't be too bad, or she wouldn't be that bad. Is there somebody out there that maybe everybody can say, all right, we'll accept this person?
This is what could happen.
All right.
So this is what could happen. In Massachusetts, there were 2 Democrats running for Speaker of the House, okay, because the Democrats had an overwhelming majority, Richard Volk and Tom Finneran. So Richard Volk was the more liberal candidate. He was the majority leader, and he was supposed to win. So this is what Tom Finneran did. He was a more conservative Democrat. He went to the Republicans, and there are very few Republicans in the House, and said, you either want him or do you want me? Why don't you vote for me? Normally, the Republicans would just put up a sacrificial lamb, and that sacrificial lamb will become their speaker candidate and will lose. He says, why don't you support me instead? So Tom Finneran had a coalition of Democrats and the Republicans, and that put him over the top. So theoretically, let's say every Democrat agrees to support a moderate Republican. Let's say Brian Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania. Then you get about 6 Republican moderates to support that candidate. Then theoretically, you get to 218, 212, and then you get 5 or 6 other people. Then you have a moderate Republican as speaker, in which case that would be kind of, I think that would be a power play, I think, against the more conservative faction. But it's certainly something that is possible. The other possibility, what if Kevin McCarthy goes to the Democrats and say, I'll make this a coalition government. I'll essentially give you certain chairmanships. What do you want? Do you want another seat on the Ways and Means Committee and the Administration Committee? What do you want? And then it gets certain Democrats to vote for him. Those are 2 possible scenarios. But on the right, I think there are some Republicans, Chip Roy in Texas, for example, who might come around to Kevin McCarthy. But you still wonder, is there any possible scenario where Lori Bobart, where Matt Gaetz, where Bob Good of Virginia were to come and actually support Kevin McCarthy? And I think that I cannot see any scenario, and he only needs essentially, if just 5 Republicans keep voting against Kevin McCarthy does not get to 218 votes.
All right, because you got guys like Matt Gaetz who just outright says, "No, I'm not going to do it. Quit asking me. I'm not going to do it." And so I guess in that kind of situation, you've got to start writing certain people off. But what happens, like you said, if he goes to the other side and starts making deals with the Democrats, well, now these 20 guys are really miffed, aren't they? Because, I mean, if you're really going to, actually switch to the other side, not that I guess it matters if they get all the votes that they need, but could that also be a good thing if we're starting to work together with both sides?
Theoretically, yeah, it would be something that we've really never seen in the United States. The closest we've seen is the Democrats back in 1916. The Republicans picked up majority in that election. So what the Democrats did at the time, there were socialist and progressive party members. They formed a coalition with them. They essentially said, caucus with us, vote for the Democrat, vote for Champ Clark for Speaker, the congressman from Missouri, and we'll essentially let you in the coalition. And that worked. This is something you see in other countries all the time. You see on the news, you see Israel, Mexico, all these other countries, and you say, wow, they have a coalition government. And oftentimes that does happen. It happened in Great Britain, for example, the Liberal Democrats and the Tories. So theoretically, that could happen. My supposition is this, though. If Kevin McCarthy were to do that and work with the Democrats, the conservatives would put somebody up against him in his primary in 2020 in Bakersfield. And I think that it's a very conservative district. I think that if they were to do that, I think he would be spending a lot of money trying to fend off a challenge in that primary in 2020. But they would definitely do something. Matt Gaetz has said he would resign from Congress if Kevin McCarthy were to form a coalition with Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
So
he just quit?
But theoretically, would Kevin McCarthy be willing to be speaker just for one term and then try to run for re-election and try to do it all over again, try to form a coalition government again? Theoretically, I guess you could say it's an act of I guess you could say either statesmanship or opportunism to spend depending on your vantage point.
Right. Okay. Well, obviously, you're a Speaker of the House. You're third in line. There's President. There's Vice President, and then there's Speaker of the House. Okay. So I guess that's a big deal. When you're aside, I just recently read up on all the responsibilities and perks that come with being Speaker of the House. Explain a little bit why this is such an appealing position and why he's fighting like hell to get it.
Yeah, and Kevin McCarthy is somebody who's tried to get this before, back in 2014 when John Boehner resigned, 2015. He didn't get it in part because he made a statement on Fox News that Benghazi essentially was benefiting the Republicans politically, and they were only trying to do the investigation to try to kind of enervate or weaken Hillary Clinton. So that's how Paul Ryan eventually became Speaker. But he's been wanting to do this since he got elected to Congress in 2006, basically. Mm-hmm. First of all, you're the most powerful member. You have a steering committee, but you appoint the members of the steering committee, and they then appoint members of the majority party to the committees. You're the most powerful person. You get protection by the Capitol Police. You are third line of government. You get to meet other members of all the other speakers of all the other parliaments. And frankly, you probably get to bring a lot of largesse home from your district because it's very, from a parochial standpoint, because it's very hard for a president to try to object to something when the Speaker of the House that they have to work with that person on. So you can bring as much pork barrel spending to your district as you possibly can. And you get an oil painting that's commissioned and that has to be there. So you're going to have a legacy. But that being said, how many Speakers of the House can most people name historically? Most people would say, well, maybe Tip O'Neill, Newt Gingrich, Nancy Pelosi. But the vast majority of people, 100 years later, probably don't remember many speakers of the House.
Right. Okay. Well, here we are. It's January 6, 23, the big anniversary, by the way, of whatever the hell happened. And are they actually in session now, or do we have to wait to actually begin anything until we have a leader? Is there a big holdup now? We just got to wait.
Yes, casework is continuing. So if you have a case, if you have a VA case or anything that you're trying to use your congressman as a conduit, the staffs are still working. But the staffs are still working. Basically, they're paid through January 13th, my understanding right now. But essentially, the speaker's vote is the first vote, the most important vote. The first vote you have is the speaker. The speaker then organizes everything. So if you don't have a speaker, technically, you do not have a House of Representatives right now in terms of you do not have an actual member. You have a member-elect still, but once the speaker gets in, the speaker then swears in the other members, so there is nobody to swear in the other members. So right now, they are essentially still congressmen-elects.
So nothing's going on yet. Okay, so there's no deadline for this. So this could go on to April, May, whatever, and all. We don't have any House representatives. That's feasible.
It went for 3 months back in 1855, and eventually, back then though, you had 20 people running, and eventually they made an agreement. And here's the agreement they made back then. They said the majority, because they were so tired of this, they said in order to win, in order to become the Speaker of the House, you do not need an outright majority. You only need a plurality. And so finally, Nathaniel Banks of Massachusetts, one of the 20 candidates, becomes Speaker of the House, serves for one term, and later becomes governor of Massachusetts. But this does happen. 1923 is actually a really good precedent because it's very similar in terms of members of a party wanting concessions. But back then, this is right after the Republican Party lost 77 seats in the midterm election of 1922. This was only 14 seats that they gained this time around, but that's how many they lost in that midterm election. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of backlash in terms of this. There was the conservatives, or this was the progressives, and the progressives eventually got Frederick Gillette, the Speaker of the House, to agree to democratize the House a lot, but very much a mirror image, eerie similitudes, if you will.
All right. Well, also, I don't know if everybody realizes this. I don't know. I actually didn't until just a few months ago. Anybody can be Speaker of the House.
Yes.
You don't have to be part of you don't even have to be part of the House of Representatives. You and I, Rich, could be, if everybody really liked us. In my case, not so much. They could elect us to be Speaker of the House. Do you think in some type of, I don't put anything beyond anything at this point in this wacky world we live in. Do you think there's any remote possibility that we get somebody from the outside to come in and do this?
Yeah, it's not a categorical imperative. It's extremely slim, de minimis, if you will, but could it happen? Yes, it's true. The Constitution does not say it has to be a sitting member. So Jim Cooper from Tennessee never wanted to vote for Nancy Pelosi. He would always vote. He would sometimes voted for Colin Powell for Speaker of the House. People say, how can you vote for Colin Powell? He's not a member. We don't have to be a member. Matt Gaetz went to Donald Trump and asked about a year ago and said, what do you think of the idea of putting you up for Speaker of the House if the Republicans take the hegemony or take majority over the House of Representatives? And he said, it's an interesting idea. Can you imagine the scenario? Joe Biden delivering a State of the Union address. You have Kamala Harris as the vice president sitting behind him. And then you have Donald Trump sitting right next to her. Yes, theoretically, that could happen. There's absolutely nothing in the Constitution. But my question is, so if somebody puts up John Smith, how do you know which John Smith it is? It's a whole group. There's actually a club of John Smiths in this country. So if someone says John Smith and then they go out and they say, and then do they notify this John Smith? Do they say, John Smith from, Hot Springs, Arkansas, do you want to be Speaker of the House because they just nominated you? I don't know how that works.
Wow. Okay. But you technically could. I mean, and again,
there is a John Smith club.
Okay, wait a minute. There's actually a John Smith out there that hypothetically
and they all like Pocahontas.
And they all like Pocahontas. This is the world we live in, Rich. And seriously, nothing surprises me anymore. Nothing does. I mean, this could turn into a giant game show. We could have, who wants to be Speaker of the House here pretty soon. Well, I don't see. Okay, so you've got all this infighting, all this stuff going on, but you also, this is pretty rare to have this kind of infighting within your own party. What do you think is going to be the overall outcome of that? I mean, you've got typically, I mean, these Democrats, I mean, they're tight as blood. I mean, they go along with whatever, they're going to go with. But when you have this family Republican infighting, I mean, do you see anything imploding? I mean, because what could be the ramifications of everything going on with this?
Yeah, and there is infighting on the other side too, by the way. I think that Nancy Pelosi, for example, always had issues with the squad. She wasn't really necessarily at war, but they were kind of always at arm's length. So the Republicans not the only party that has disunity. And obviously, when you have 222 individuals, all from different congressional districts, some from more moderate districts, some from extremely conservative districts, they're not going to all be a monolith, or they're not all going to be in unison. But essentially, you do have, remember, the vast majority of Republicans right now, even some conservatives like Jim Jordan, even a lot of Freedom Caucus members. Jim Jordan was once the chairman of the Freedom Caucus, are supporting Kevin McCarthy. It's still 20 members out of 222, but because this is such a thin majority, they actually are making a difference between whether Kevin McCarthy is Speaker of the House or it's essentially a null set right now.
Okay, well, bringing it back to Jim Jordan, I mean, I believe he said he just doesn't want to do it. But there are some that say, no, we're gonna nominate you anyway. What happens in that scenario? Say you've got this guy like Jim Jordan that just says, I don't want to do it. I'm not. Leave me alone. I'm sorry, Jim. We elected you. So what do you do in that situation? Does Jim just not show up, or how does that work?
Yeah, Jim Jordan, I guess, voted against his own nomination because he voted for Kevin McCarthy. Theoretically, yeah, you can't force. It's not, indentured servitude. You can't force somebody to actually be Speaker of the House. So if somebody says, I don't want to be the Speaker, they would just turn it down, and then they would just have a vote again. But theoretically, that could happen. But I don't think Jim Jordan was only getting those 20 votes. He never really got out of that caucus, and he never actually supported himself. As a matter of fact, he was very much a vociferous supporter of Kevin McCarthy. His ambition is to be chairman of the Judiciary Committee, not to be maybe not to be Speaker of the House now, but perhaps he wants to be his successor in a couple more terms.
Okay, there's nothing in the Constitution, I'm not that much of a scholar on it, that we can't get Joe or somebody to come in with one of these silly executive orders. There's no way he could appoint somebody, could he?
Could he get appointed to become Speaker of the House? No, because it has to come from the members of Congress, and he is not a member of Congress.
That's
By that
I
mean, they could appoint somebody from outside the chamber, but somebody who's not a member of Congress could not just come in there and decide who it's going to be.
So the only way we're going to do this is if we get this consensus and everybody goes along with it and say, okay, he's our guy. What is, you may have said this earlier, what is the record votes of getting rejected from this thing?
133.
Oh,
but that was a little bit different though. 133 because there were other candidates running. It wasn't just one candidate. Eventually, they agreed on a consensus candidate at the time. This was right at the time. The Democratic Party, the Whig Party, it basically imploded. You have the Know Nothing Party, you have the Free Soil Party, you have the Republican Party, all these new parties coming up. And essentially, you have this coalition of the Know Nothings, the Republicans, and the Free Soils all essentially agreeing on this as a compromise candidate. This is different because there's only one major candidate that is up. By major candidate, I mean somebody who actually has a legitimate chance of winning a majority. Jim Jordan, for example, does not have a legitimate chance of getting over those 20 votes.
And there's nobody else. There's nobody else.
Congressman Donalds. No, nobody. Now, theoretically, if Kevin McCarthy and I don't see this happening, decides, you know what, I'm going to stand down, then you have Steve Scalise, who would be the incoming majority leader, who's currently who was the minority whip rather from Louisiana. He'd probably be the second choice, and my guess is that he would probably get, at least begrudgingly, a lot of members of the Freedom Caucus. He probably would secure a 218 votes or so. But I really don't see a scenario where Kevin McCarthy is embarrassed with his head between his legs and says, you know what, I tried, but I'm not going to do this. I think he's just going to play this out as long as he possibly can.
Well, I think it'd be actually more embarrassing to be rejected 240 times when right now he could just step down at 12. I mean, for the good of the party though, and the good of the country, I mean, there's got to be a point in time where you just say, hey, look, I don't think she's going to go out with me, and just say that's it. Let's move on to option 2 that everybody can agree on. To me, it seems almost a little egotistical and selfish just to keep pouting until you get your way just for your own vanity. I mean, do you think he even sees that? I mean, you can't think for him, obviously, but are there other people you think they're saying, hey, Kevin, maybe you want to step down so we can get on with business here?
I'm sure there are people that are telling him that privately, but I think obviously, self-preservation is pretty much the first law of human nature. In his case, the last thing he wants is, first of all, to go back to his constituents, say, I tried to be Speaker of the House. Now I'm just going to be a backbencher. Now I'm not going to have all this power. And it's just going to be embarrassing for himself. But also, I think that he sees himself, obviously there's got to be some sort of a manifest destiny for anybody who gets to the point where you get to that point that as soon as you're elected United States Congress, you're immediately raising money for everybody. He was one of the young guns. He was one of the most ambitious members of Congress. He's already been a minority leader in Sacramento when he was in the California legislature. He worked for one of the most powerful members of the United States Congress. He worked for Bill Thomas, who was chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. He's somebody who is very ambitious. What is going through his membrane right now in terms of what he actually wants to accomplish, I don't know, but it would be extremely hard for me to see a scenario where he stands down.
Huh. Okay. So we're going to just deal with this gridlock for who knows how long. In the meantime, what's the Senate doing? I mean, they went on with their business, didn't they? I mean, everybody took their new roles and whatnot. I mean, is the country functioning? Is that 2/3? Well, I should say 1/3. Is that still functioning, as it should be right now?
Yeah. I mean, I think Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer out in front of the House chamber singing, we got 99 problems, but a speaker ain't one.
Yeah. Right. It's crazy time. I mean,
they are. Absolutely. They've all been sworn in. They're
all sworn in. We're all there.
They're all
Joe's down in on the beach somewhere. So I think he's back at this point. So now we've got that. We've got this gridlock in the U.S. House of Representatives. I mean, this is typical. This is just typical. All right. To summarize, wrap it all up. 1 week from today, what would that be? The 13th. What do you think? Where do you think we'll be? What do you think we'll be looking at? Will we be telling the same story, or are we going to have business as it should have been?
I think Kevin McCarthy is going to get just enough votes, 218. There's still going to be about 4 Freedom Caucus members, probably Matt Gaetz, Lori Bobart, probably Congressman Good, maybe Ralph Norman of South Carolina, that will not vote for him under any circumstance. He's probably going to get just enough votes, and he's going to make so many concessions, even more potentially than he's already made. And the motion to vacate the chair is an elephantine concession because only one member can put up a vote of no confidence, and they all have to vote on whether he should still be speaker. But my guess is he gets in there by 1 vote.
Okay. What if they say, Kevin, you can't have your portrait painted? Do you think maybe that would do it?
Then I think he resigns from Congress. Immediately if that were the case. Yes, that's what that's the most important thing, because then you have an actual legacy. Maybe they can even make an agreement. We'll get you in there for, you can be in there for a couple of weeks. You can have the portrait made, and then you resign, and then and then Scalise goes, and maybe that's part of the agreement.
All right. Well, yeah, I'm a syndicated cartoonist, Rich. I could do a cartoon of him. Maybe that would make him happy. I don't know. At this point, it's all.
Let's work on it.
Let's work on that, and that'll be, our topic of discussion the next time we meet, which will probably be tomorrow. The way the country is going to hell in a handbasket, but knowing that you're out there on top of it makes me sleep a little bit better at night. So I want to thank you for that. Okay.
I'm glad somebody's sleeping better because of me.
Well, it certainly isn't me. Well, buddy, thanks a lot for joining me. Any last words before we check out until next time?
Let's party like it's 1923.
Good idea.
With all the flappers and everything else,
Why not?
Just like the roaring 20s.
Yeah, I think they
And the real winner this week, Frederick Gillette, because now somebody has been lost to history. Now everyone knows who not everybody, but people that are politically dexterous now know who Frederick Gillette is. He's really come up like a phoenix rising from the ashes.
That's perfect, and that can be in your next book edition. That'll be perfect. So you can.
You know what they said about him? They said he was so boring. They said they said he should never get coffee in the morning for fear he'll be awake all day.
I like that. People have said that about me, though. Anyway, moving on. Buddy, it's always a pleasure to have you on. I mean, I'll let you know as soon as anything breaks, I'm going to be on that phone and say, Rich, we need you to talk some more, okay? So be on standby, all right? Okay.
Categorically.
You got it. All right, buddy. Thanks again for joining me. And thank you for joining me, whether you've been listening or watching. I'm Todd Schowalter, and this is Right Mind. And remember, if you don't have a right mind, you don't have a mind at all. Till next time, bye-bye.
This has been the Right Mind Podcast with Todd Schowalter.